also Enrin for inviting me to speak here. That's really great, and I hope to build upon the last speaker and also the first speaker actually. So we'll talk a little bit more about culture change, and you'll see this pyramid again, either bottom up or top down or iterative or whatever. Let's see. So the title of my talk is Changing Reproducibility Practice Means Changing Research Culture. So I'm from the Reproducibility Network, so that's going to be my focus here. I'll talk a little bit about, for the people who are not so familiar, what reproducibility means, about reproducibility itself. I'll talk a little bit, of course, about research culture, but also about the network and how we aim to contribute towards culture change. When I was going over my presentation, I saw my title again, and I thought, well, maybe it's good. Let's see. Oh, it's here. Eh? Yeah, it's a declarative title, but maybe you don't think it's so declarative. So maybe also because my background is in human movement sciences, I think it would be nice if the people who agree with me on this title stand up now. Have some movement. Okay. Yeah, you need some time to think about it. Okay, you can sit down again. And because these other people also need movement, now stand up if you disagree. Oh, wow. Okay, because everybody needs movement, now also stand up if it's really hard for you to get an opinion on this. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, maybe after my presentation, you have an opinion on this. We'll see. Let's see if this works. Does it? Okay, so a little, as I promised, a little bit about reproducibility. There's maybe hundreds of definitions on reproducibility or replicability. I like to distinguish between the process and reproducibility as a process, so being transparent about what you do and also accountable about what you do in your research. In other words, other people should be able to reproduce what you did. This is actually the cornerstone of research, I think, what many people are taught in their first years of their bachelor studies. And then the other thing is reproducibility of outcomes. So, and there we can distinguish a couple of things: replications, so testing the reliability of a prior finding with different data. So you redo a study, you collect your own data, and then you see whether the results you get are the same or similar to prior studies. Reproducibility, that's a bit funny, it's the same term again, but that's testing the reliability of a prior finding using the same data and the same analysis strategy. So just reusing the data and reusing the analysis strategy, whether that is code or maybe other forms of strategies that you use, and then see whether you come up with the same result. And robustness refers to testing the reliability of a prior finding using the same data, but a different analysis strategy. And so these are subtle differences, but it's good, I think, to keep in mind if you're not familiar with the term reproducibility. Okay, so what are aspects of reproducibility throughout the research process? And I think they have all been mentioned already. So usually it starts with pre-registration. You have a plan for your study. You write that up in as much detail as you can, and then you pre-register that. So you let yourself and others know what you're planning to do. And that supports replicability or reproducibility, and it prevents or limits publication bias and selective outcome reporting, so choosing the outcome in your results sections if you write it up in a paper later. And it also, I think, very nicely shows, and I think Rose already did that also this morning, how reproducibility or open science practices are related to research integrity aspects. Now, there's the thing about you can make your data fair, open, or at least fair. You can have, if you have software, fair software, reproducibility checks in your research, so let other people check what you did. If you have any protocol amendments, you should, of course, report them and explain them. So that comes back to the pre-registration. And in the end, hopefully you'll publish open access and people can read what you've done. Now, how is that different from the culture that was traditional? In the traditional culture, everything was about just publishing, I think. Yeah, and it comes down to that. So I think we've come a long way. I wouldn't say, I saw that Rose this morning said this is standard practice now. I don't think it's standard practice. And I think we need to change the culture to maybe make it standard practice without falling into the pitfalls that you also discussed this morning, of course. Okay, so culture change. I was a little bit jealous of Yuri that he found the pyramid of Nosek, but then with colors. I could only find it in black and white, but it's of course the same pyramid. If you talk about culture change, there's of course lots of models that go with it, or with behavior change. And one of the things I've used before, but I will also come back to in a bit, is the diffusion of innovations model. Who knows the diffusion of innovation model? You can just wave your hands this time. Okay, that's quite a lot. So if you introduce innovations, in my example, that would be reproducible working, you can distinguish between groups of people. So you have the innovators. The innovators are the people that think about these things and that come up with solutions for working reproducibly. And so these are people who are really at the forefront, but of course it's a small minority of the population of people. And then you have these early adapters, people who will, as soon as something workable is out there for them, they will adapt to that and they will start working reproducibly, even if there's not yet a finished workflow or product or whatever. And after that, we have the early majority and the late majority of people. And that's actually the people we want to get on board. As soon as we have these, we have almost everybody, except for the laggards, the people who actually really don't want to change. But that's that. In the end, either they will stop working or they will have to change their behavior. And so I think we really have to focus on that early and that late majority, and I also think we're not yet there. And this is the challenge we face. Now, to the Dutch Reproducibility Network. The aim of the Dutch Reproducibility Network is to stimulate initiatives that increase reproducible working, in short. And this picture might seem, I'm not sure if you like it or if you think it's complicated. What it tries to depict is that we are with the steering group. I'm a member of that. We also have a coordinator, Daniela, who's in the back. You can wave, Daniela. It's also good for your movement. And Tamarinde is also part of our steering group. She's also in the back. We have an advisory board, but most importantly, we have members and stakeholders or allied initiatives that are connected in the network. We want to work collaboratively, and we've heard that a couple of times already before. I think that's super important. So what we want to do is, with research performing institutions, these blue things, local initiatives, those are bottom-up usually, grassroots initiatives like open science communities, and there's a couple of representatives here of those organizations as well, and some external organizations. we would like, with that network of people and organizations, work together in spreading useful initiatives. Okay, so our blue rectangles, so the research performing initiatives until now, you can see on the left-hand side, so there's a couple of universities there, University Medical Center and the eScience Center that works on research software in the Netherlands. And then there's a lot of other stakeholder and bottom-up initiatives and communities on the right-hand side, also the the Netherlands Research Integrity Network. So we work together, as already was mentioned this morning. And together with all those partners, we try to change culture a little bit. Now, one of the things we do and did recently is we come together with the people from the network. We call those the network node leads. And we talk about how we can do that. And I think a couple of weeks ago we were together and we discussed a framework from the knowledge exchange. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with knowledge exchange, but that's an organization, another organization consisting of 6 separate organizations. And it's represented in the Netherlands by SURF, which you might know. I'm not sure, most of you who work in universities will know SURF. And they wrote a report and did a study to investigate how the practice of conducting research in a reproducible way can be scaled up. And so this is really about getting that majority of people involved, moving outside of the bubble of people like us here and other people who are really into this, to the majority of researchers, and seeing whether we can scale up reproducible working. Now, actually, underlying their study are these 2 culture change or behavior change models that I showed earlier, and also 1 or 2 others. And what they did or distinguish is they distinguish a couple of levels in scaling up reproducibility. So they talk about level 1, that's if there are pockets of excellence. And so there are some, as you could maybe see, as innovators or early followers of people that work in isolated contexts in a reproducible way. For examples, we have, there are some isolated code repositories, or there's other initiatives like reproducibilities, journal club types of initiatives. Then level 2 is partially coordinated efforts, like the carpentries trainings that you might have heard of, or reproducibility integrated into courses within programs at the master or the PhD level, or maybe even the bachelor level. And then you have this level 3, where there is organizational level commitment, and it's fully integrated into organizations, and there are national networks. Now, so they distinguish these. What they say is an organization may function at more than 1 level. Also important, different levels may be seen as beneficial by different stakeholders. So that's also a little bit about incentives, again, and rewards. And it's good to keep in mind that this is really focused on internal aspects of an organization, and of course external factors can also be relevant. Okay, so they move on, and this is very small probably. I'm gonna see, yeah, this is really hard to read, but that doesn't matter too much. So what they did next is they distinguished 7 items on which you can work to scale up reproducibility. So the first item, if you can read, I'm not sure, it says, oh, that doesn't work, it doesn't matter, is tools. And there's also something on, let's see, education and training. And so there's five of these other things. And you can distinguish the levels per aspect. And what they say in their report, or what they recommend, is to turn this into a tool for your institution and to sort of score your institution based on these different aspects that you can work up in scaling reproducibility and see where your institution is at. And then that might provide you with clues to, as to where you have to work on. Eh? Okay, so that's also what we did in our network node meeting. So we thought we can use this model maybe, and we'll try that out with the institutions that are on board already with our network. And a funny thing happened, I think, because we saw some discrepancy. What we saw in a lot of organizations is that organizations' policies are in place. So that's actually the top of the pyramid, that we were talking about. So we have policies in most of the institutions, and we have networks, for instance, NLRN and our own network. So actually, it looks pretty nice, but if you look at the implementation at the departmental or group level, it's not that good. Actually, if you see where we're at there, we're really still at the point of these pockets of excellence. And I fully agree with Yuri, where he ended, is that we need to work at the departmental level. We're not there yet, not by a long shot, I guess. Okay, so some work that we're doing ourselves within the network to try to move forward is we were involved in writing up some statements, one together with the open science communities, the Netherlands, on how we collaborate and what we stand for. We also were involved in a statement by international or other international reproducibility networks about what a reproducibility network is and what we aim to do. We came up or developed focus areas to work on in the coming years. So what we will try to do is make an inventory of materials, efforts, and projects related to increasing reproducibility and replication for onboarding of people. So that's actually a little bit about making it easy and making it evident what we need to do for people. We also would like to focus on replication and reproducibility in non-quantitative science and scholarship, because we see that, for instance, the language between disciplines really differs sometimes. The term reproducibility alone is sometimes very distant for people in the humanities, for instance. So that's really a topic that I think, need to work on, and we are very eager to work on. We like to connect researchers and research support staff, because we see that there's still a disconnect there. There's loads of things happening at institutional levels in support staff. And you might know the digital competence centers, for instance, in universities and universities of applied sciences that are working very hard, but we also see that they cannot always reach the researchers yet, and also the other way around. And I think, and that's also been stressed by the former two speakers already, we would like to collaborate with meta-scientists, because the evidence base is very, very important in what we do. We need to have an evidence base on the interventions we do with each other, of course. Now, this is a couple of other things we're doing. Yeah, I'm wrapping up. The only thing I would like to really focus your attention on is the following symposium. That's our own symposium, the 6th of December. So if you're interested in this stuff, please follow the QR code or come to our site, and you'll also find a link, and register and come to the lovely place of Groningen, because that's the host of the symposium this year. And just to see, I think we have 30 seconds to move again. If I've changed your mind, does changing reproducibility practices mean changing research culture? Who says yes now? I'm of course biased, but I think I see more people now. Thanks a lot. If there's questions.
Questions? So you first kept sitting, and now you were doubting of standing up, right? So.
Yeah, well, it's related a bit to one of your happy hours that you also last week. Guido Kamp, University of Groningen, instructor scientific integrity. At your happy hour, you mentioned the topic: is there a reproducibility crisis?
Yeah.
And you said, well, there is no crisis, but would you say that because a crisis is something imminent and that might lead to an imminent change because there's a need for change? Do you think it should deserve the predicate crisis to enable a culture change to happen?
Yeah, it's a good question. I talked about that indeed last week. I said then, and that's still my opinion. I don't like the word crisis too much. I think this also came up a little bit in the questions after the first keynote. I think a positive approach is more viable. I think we will get more people aboard than just to talk about crisis. What you sometimes see, and that's also been studied a little bit, is that if we stress too much that we're in a crisis, people will fall back into a nihilism, and they will just say, oh, it's so bad. Research is just a crisis. It's nothing. How can we ever get out of this? I'll just go on with what I've been doing so far.
Some people need the urgency.
Yeah. Now, I think urgency is good, but still I like the positive approach better.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, thanks for this very interesting thought-provoking talk, Serge Horbach from Radboud University. I would like to challenge you a bit. I think, well, maybe intentional or not, I think your talk fits very well in this very beautiful venue that we are at today. I sensed a bit of this sense of, well, we need to convert the people out there. There are many non-believers yet that we have to get on board on our mission to better science. And then I was so interested in your use of the diffusion model here, which I think in some areas has been criticized quite a bit, as it has this implicit sort of chemical metaphor of things just naturally spreading and then people passively absorbing this kind of thought, which I think usually is not how things work. People, if at all they take on board these things, then actively engage with it, twist it, mold it to their own environment and shape their own practices, maybe or maybe not according to the way in which we would like to convert them. I'm just curious about whether you think that is a problem, that people shape these things and maybe tend to be converted in their own ways or along their own standards, or whether we really need them to follow the rules as we think science should be done best.
Ooh, good question. Yeah, I like it. Maybe you can come back, Serge, because I have. First, I would like to ask you a question. What are the rules? What are the rules that we have now? in terms of, well, I'm talking about reproducibility, of course, but is there a set of rules now, or because that's, yeah, or in science or research?
Well, I think following the keynote talk, increasingly so, they are in place. They tend to come from very specific niches within science, which may or may not be called pockets of excellence. I'm not sure.
Or just pockets. Yeah. No, if you look at it that way, I'm not sure if we have these set rules already, and I would certainly not be, I would not say that we should have them and we should impose them on all other people. As I said, one of the focus areas of our network is also to pay attention to non-quantitative sciences, because most of the rules or methods have come from the quantitative sciences, I guess. So I think we have to resolve that or debate or discuss that with each other. And I would think that there are some communalities, some generic principles that hold for every discipline, for instance, and maybe for every group. But other things are more, discipline-specific or group-specific or context-specific, and we need to be, sort of flexible about that, I guess. I also think, I mean, if we can only get people to think about these questions, that would be the first step. And then take a first step, that would be a second step in doing. So it's just taking small steps, not asking too much from each other. And gradually we build on what we know, or we build on what we do, and hopefully we'll gather knowledge about what works and what doesn't work for whom. And in that way, I think we have to progress. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, many follow-up questions.
Okay, sorry.
Thanks. I actually want to follow up. So in my field, the innovation theory is criticized as in discussions about cultural imperialism. And as a qualitative researcher, I'm also here, I hear you at the end, right, talking about how we need to think how this would apply to other kinds of research. But in this context, I'm wondering to what extent, this way of talking about a academic culture or a research culture may be tricky. And the previous speaker talked about the importance of diversity, this poor PhD student at the beginning, right? And then the arrow coming in. We have talked about not leaving some people behind, or we heard Rossi talking about that. So I'm wondering, how, of the dangers of talking and whether we should pluralize to start this idea of culture. Thanks.
Yeah, very shortly, I agree. I think, it's a bit difficult or complex to talk about the culture. No, I agree. There's different cultures.
Hi, my name is Tom van Drumlen, CWTS at the Leiden University. I just I see a similar line in the first three talks, and I really enjoyed the shifting of focus on thinking about responsibility that institutions may have. But when talking about a research culture, and I think this is kind of similar to what the two previous questions were about, I doubt whether it's something that universities can promote, foster, or even I saw on Yuri's slide, whether it's something that universities can provide. Can you provide a culture as a university? And my question would be to think a little bit, ask you to think a little bit about taking responsibility away from the individual researchers is nice, but the other side of the coin of responsibility is also freedom. By taking away responsibility, you take away people's ability to choose how they implement certain things. So by taking away this responsibility, it can very much be a good thing, but do you also see maybe a risk for loss of empowerment of researchers kind of making their own culture?
Yeah, good point. I agree with you that institutions cannot sort of make the change in culture themselves, but they are an important player, I think. And in terms of sort of the freedom you have and autonomy, I think you have to balance that against also ease of use, because if you have too much flexibility or degrees of freedom, it's also very hard for many researchers to see what they can do, because there's so much out there. That's actually what we see in our field of reproducibility. There's millions of initiatives and all these tools, but for the beginning researcher, which should I use? And sometimes it helps if institutions can tailor that, or down a bit to a couple of these things that we just use. And then, of course, we can always have the debate about whether this works, and we can monitor it, and maybe we have to have additional things, or maybe we have to change it. But it also sometimes, helps if we make it easy. Yeah? That's the first layer in the pyramid of NOSEC. Yeah, facilitating, yeah. No.